Hare Krishna. So, dear devotees, we welcome you to this today's Srimad Bhagavatam systemic study, Bhakti Vaibhava. We welcome our teacher, His Grace Srivas Vanacari. We look forward to learning. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we can start. Om Jnana Tamridasya Jnana Jnanashala Kaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Bhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yukta Padakamalam Sri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunastambitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Tirtha Swami Iti Namini Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Sri Tatmane Sri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tetariti Namini Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisai Sasuya Bhadi Pasachade Satarini Vanchakalpatarvyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha paritanam pavinibhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam lagayate grim yat karipatamahan vande Shri Guru Dina Taranam Paramanam Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Akanda Mandanakram Yaptayina Characharam Tapadam Dashitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Narayana Namaskritya Narachaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Chaya Mudirayat Nashtapraya Subhadresu Nityam Bhagavatam Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So everyone is welcome to today's session of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 21, entitled Conversation Between Manu and Kadarma Muni. So even though this unit is called Kadarma Muni unit or Kadarma Muni Devahuti unit, but the first chapter to be discussed does not really talk about Kadarma Muni or Devahuti. It talks about Brahma's creation. So the question may arise, what is the relationship between Brahma's creation and Kadarma Muni? So as a way of beginning this chapter, as a way of linking the previous chapter to this chapter, can we recollect or recap some of the discussions we had in the previous chapter? Because we are supposed to link the previous chapter with this chapter. And so the question is, in the previous chapter, we discussed Brahma's creation. So how is the previous chapter connected to Kadarma Muni? And Swayambhuva Manu? Any answers?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances at your dear lotus feet.
All glory to Guru Dev Goswami Prabhupada.
Yes, getting to the last stages of the last chapter, we entered. We were discussing the creation of Brahma. Now Brahma started improving his creation, where he created the sages, and then finally created the human beings, and then the sages glorify him for creating such a being.
Yeah. Okay. So how does that creation of the human beings connect with this chapter we're going to discuss?
In humanity connection, since he wanted to populate the universe and he needs people to assist him to multiply the population, I think Kadama Muni and Swayambhuva Muni as Prajapatis are to help him in populating the universe with human beings.
Yeah. So that is the link. The link is that before there can be increase in population, there must be progenitors. Before there can be population, there had to be Prajapatis. So Brahma's creation, which began with the demonic class of people, ended up with the creation of the first class human beings, the sages. Brahma started creating from a very low class of living entities, the yakshas and rakshasas, the demons and so on. But gradually Brahma improved his creation, and then he created the last ones, which are the sages. But before the creation of the sages, Brahma created Manu. Manu and his Swayambhuva Manu, his consort, Shatarupa.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Please, my curiosity wants to know the population of the sages. How many are there? 9 of them, 12 of them. The number of the sages that were created.
The sages, in this particular, there are 9. There are 9 sages.
Okay, thank you, Prabhupada.
9, because you would get to know that the 9 daughters of Nevahuti were married to the 9 sages. But sometimes it's also mentioned 7 sages, like in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna mentions 7 sages. So sometimes there are 9, sometimes there are 7. But in this particular episode of creation, there are 9. And so the 9 daughters of the Vibhuti were married to them. We will come across them in later chapters of this unit. So, so the link between the previous chapter and this chapter is that Brahma provided the Prajapatis. Brahma created the Prajapatis. Actually, Brahma was unhappy with his creation. Things were not going the way he wanted it. Brahma was creating from all different parts of his body. He was creating from his buttocks, he was creating from his hands, he was creating from his chest, he was creating from his eyebrows, he was creating from everywhere. But the creation was not going in the orderly manner Brahma wanted it. So it became necessary. Even Brahma engaged Lord Shiva also in creating. When Lord Shiva was born, Brahma engaged Lord Shiva in creating. But Lord Shiva's creation were rather destroying the universe. So Brahma has to stop Shiva from creation. And then he came up with the idea that let me create the Prajapatis. The Prajapatis, they are the forefathers of humanity. They are empowered to populate the universe. And so Swayambhuva Manu is a Prajapati. Kadarma Muni is a Prajapati. Daksha is a Prajapati. Even sometimes Brahma himself is considered a Prajapati. So Brahma has created the Prajapatis. And now he has to set the ball rolling. He has to set the increase in population rolling. So that is what this chapter is going to discuss, how the population began to increase. So before we plunge into this chapter, I would like us to maybe recap a few other points that were discussed in the previous chapter. Are there any things that we can remember from the last chapter what we discussed before we move on? Just as a way of revising.
Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we also discussed about the importance of the Shroud Ceremony.
Okay.
For the forefathers.
Yep.
And except one is has risen to the level of a devotee, this ceremony is very, very important for helping the forefathers get liberated or get physical body by which they can continue their progress towards devotional life.
Yeah. Yeah. When Brahma created the Sadhyas and the Pittas, then the issue of Shraddha becomes important. And there's the pretty lock. Sometimes pretty lock is referred to as Samyampuri. Samyampuri is Yamaraj's location, Yamaraj's planet. So sometimes it is said that Yamaraj's planet is also pretty lock, but actually it's not so. Pretty lock is ruled by Aryama. Pretty lock is ruled by Aryama. Samyampuri is ruled by Yamaraj. So, though Yamaraj he's a lot of debt. Is a lot of debt, and therefore every living entity in this material world is under Yamaraj's control, because everyone has to die. And so long as death is necessary, we all come under the authority of Yamaraj. So even those in Pritaloka, they're also under Yamaraj. Even Ariyama is also under Yamaraj. In fact, it's like an assistant to Yamaraj. When Yamaraj came as Vidura, he was the next person who took over Samyapuri. He took over Yamaraj's office. So it can be understood that Ariyama is very close. He's very close to Yamaraj. He knows the operations of Yamaraj. He's conversant with the activities of Yamaraj. So much so that when Yamaraj was absent, he took over the management of the hellish planets and the lower planetary systems. So, but the creation of the sadhyas and the pritis made it necessary to do the Shroud ceremony because many souls are caught up in this Pritaloka and they don't have physical bodies. They cannot move forward. They cannot come backwards. They are locked up there. So by doing this Shroud ceremony, by offering them Vishnu Prasad, and by chanting appropriate mantras for their deliverance, they can be freed from this engagement in Pritaloka. And they can, again, either they can move forward or they can be awarded gross bodies by which they can engage in devotional service, by which they can practice bhakti. So Shroud ceremony is very important for all conditioned souls. But when one transcends the position of conditionalities, when one is no more under conditional life, one does not require Shroud ceremony. So for the pure devotees, advanced devotees, Shroud ceremony is not important. In fact, I always say even all devotees, because what is Shroud ceremony? Shroud ceremony means offering Vishnu Prasad to the departed souls. But the devotees are taking Vishnu Prasad every day. Devotees are taking Vishnu Prasad every day. So therefore, they are already liberated by taking Vishnu Prasad. And Prabhupada says, when you take Vishnu Prasad, next life as a human being is guaranteed. So for those who are non-devotees, Shroud ceremony is necessary for them. But those who are practicing Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, and are taking prasadam every day, that Shroud ceremony is not necessary. They are already on the platform whereby they can receive human forms for their onward progress in Krishna consciousness. Any other point from the last chapter?
Yeah.
Before we go forward, on the explanation you just gave now, I'm just reflecting. Yes, Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, those who worship the forefathers go to the abode of the forefathers. And those, according to the scripture, we understand that those who commit suicide also, by way of untimely death, takes a ghostly body. What are the difference between these people who commit suicide or die prematurely by accident? Of course, there's no accident like accident. What is the difference between those people and those who are go to the abode of the forefathers? And then looking at, thirdly, sorry, I just wanted to put all of them together so that I don't take too much time. Okay. And thirdly, when we look at the African traditional setting, which of course I see some part of it also in India, our great ancestors, they would do a lot of ancestral worship. Could it be also the reason why an average person from this race may find themselves in the Pritaloka, the abode of the forefathers?
Yep. The difference between those who reside in Pritaloka and the people who take their lives and become ghosts, the difference is that those in Pritaloka, they their advancement is checked in the sense that they remain in that pretty log. They don't go forward and they don't come backwards. They just remain there because that has been their meditation. It has been their goal. As Krishna says, Priti Jayanti Priti Vrataha. If you worship the forefathers, that is your goal. That is your destination. So you go there. But that is not the end of life. It is not the ultimate goal. It is not the ultimate destination of the soul. So therefore, they are locked up in this pretty log, and they need to be delivered from that situation. So it is, we can say it is a meditated goal, is a desired goal, because people don't know the real goal. They don't know the ultimate goal. So they are thinking, okay, let me join my forefathers. Let me go where my forefathers are. And traditionally in Africa, it's a common practice. We can say that is our traditional worship. Every part of Africa, maybe I don't know the Muslim world, but every part of Africa, they believe in these ancestors, they believe in all these things, and they do them. So it's like our goal. And so they get there and they're locked up. They're in that situation. They can't go forward. They can't come backward. They remain in the pretty log. So therefore, when the Shroud ceremony is performed and they're offered Vishnu Prasad, immediately they are released from that situation. And some of them may have the chance to go forward, but at least if they don't go forward, they are given a human form again by which they can practice Krishna consciousness. The case of the ghost is that it is a punishment. It's a punishment when you terminate your body untimely, prematurely, then you have to live as a ghost for the rest of the years you're supposed to live. So therefore, it's a punishment for a period that you are supposed to, for the balance of your life, you live as a ghost. So the difference is, one is a punishment in the case of a ghost, and the other one is a destination that one has desired. It's a destination that one has meditated on. It's a destination that people have worked for, to go to pretty log. So, but and then because it is a goal that they work on, they can only be delivered when they are awarded the opportunity to taste Krishna Prasad. For the ghosts, they have to serve the number of years that they have the number of the balance of their lives they're supposed to live, and they terminated their lives. They have to live those number of years. And only after those number of years, they are given a chance again. But for those in pretty log, if one performs Shroud ceremony today, for the benefit of that particular person, he is awarded an opportunity to get out of pretty log. So the difference is there. One is something meditated upon, one works towards going to pretty log. In the other case, one terminates his own life and he has to suffer as a ghost. So these are the differences between the ghosts and the people in pretty log.
Okay, Maharaj, please, could you help us? What is the status of the pretty log? Is it heavenly, hellish, or in between?
Well, it is in the lower planetary system, definitely, because it's next to Yamaraj. Yes, is close to Yamaraj Loka. So all of them are considered lower planetary systems, but it cannot be described as a hellish planet. It is not. The hellish planets, they undergo intense punishment, intense pain, intense distress because of their sinful activities. But we can say that Pretty Lock is not the best place to go also, because you are kind of encaged in a situation which is not the ultimate goal. You are in a situation you want to be with your ancestors. All right, here are your ancestors, but what next? So therefore, it's not a hellish planet per se, but it's among the lower planetary systems. Just as Yamaraj's planet is not a hellish planet, but it is part of the lower planetary system. So yeah, so they're in their own location, they are part of the lower planetary systems, but they are also different from the hellish planets, like that.
Yeah, but at one point also, you see, like you were saying, our traditionalists, particularly Africans, if we, before we embrace these so-called religious practices, you can see that our main religious goal is this ancestral worship.
Yeah.
For which to every family, these ancestors are very, very, very dear to them.
Yeah.
Yes. But because we didn't know, the so-called religions also came with a proposition of going to heaven.
That's right.
But it is by fortune that we embrace Christian consciousness, that we understand that the heaven also is not the real goal of life, that there's something beyond.
Yeah.
So could you help explain these differences until one comes to Christian consciousness? We are still in the struggling.
That's right. The heaven is not a final destination. Neither hell is a final destination. Neither this Pretty Lock is a final destination. No, even Yamaraj Loka is not a final destination. The final destination of the soul is Goloka Vrindavan. The final destination of the soul is Vaikuntha. So anywhere less than this is not a permanent location for the soul. But because these religious systems who are promoting heaven, they have no knowledge of the spiritual sky, or their scriptures talks about the spiritual sky in a way they can understand. So they simply think that heaven is the ultimate. And in our situation, in our African tradition, Pretty Lock was our ultimate. In fact, in my area, there are certain ceremonies that they perform, and you can actually contact the people in Pretty Lock. Say when somebody dies and they don't understand the cause of his death, there is a particular town you go and they will perform some ceremonies for you, and they will take you to the outskirts of the town. And there you'll be exposed to this Pretty Lock. You will meet your departed parents or the departed souls, and you can communicate with them, you can talk with them. They will tell you the cause of their death, whether it was natural or unnatural, whatever. If there are some questions, some situations you are not clear of, and you want them to say maybe there are some issues concerning some property or whatever, and you are not clear what to do, you can go to them and they can talk to you. They can tell you exactly what they want. But the only condition there is that you don't cry. Yeah, if you meet your mother or your father or your parent and you cry, it means you're also going to die. That is their condition. So before they will do the ceremonies for you to speak to them, to meet them, they will tell you all the conditions. The first thing is that when you meet them, you don't cry, you don't show any sense of sorrow. And then when you are leaving them, any sound behind you, you don't look back. Any noise behind you, don't look back. If you look back, you join them.
Join them.
Yeah, so all these things are there in my area. So there is a way they contact the departed souls. So without advanced knowledge, like the knowledge of the Vedas, knowledge of the scriptures, knowledge of Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, people take that pretty long as the highest place to go because their ancestors are there. So they want to join their ancestors. And then the Christianity, Islam brings out the idea of heaven, which is supposed to be superior to this ancestral planet. But Krishna consciousness gives us even a better place, that even heaven is temporary. Vaikuntha is the real destination of the soul. So that is our fortune, that we have migrated from Prittilok to heaven, and now we are in Vaikuntha. So that is where we are at now. All our discussion, all our activities is aimed towards going to Vaikuntha, going beyond heaven and entering Vaikuntha, and even going beyond Vaikuntha and going to Goloka Vrindavan. That is that great gift, great opportunity that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has brought to the world, and His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, has sacrificed his life to make it available throughout the whole world. So that is our fortune. Otherwise, the African people, they are thinking of Prittilok. The Christian people are thinking, and the Muslims are thinking about heaven, but nobody talks about the spiritual world. But Krishna consciousness talks about the spiritual world. Any other comment? Okay, so I think what I wanted to say also was the five, we talk about the five layers of ignorance, avidya. Yeah. Tamisra, under Tamisra, Moha, Mahamoha, and Tamas. That is also very important because Brahma had to create these layers, sheets of ignorance, because the living entity wants to be away from the Supreme Lord. The living entity wants to imitate the Supreme Lord. So Brahma had to provide the suitable dress to enable the living entity live a life of forgetfulness. Material existence means a life of forgetfulness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Brahma was in charge. He was tasked to do this. So he had to create the five principles of niscience, the five principles of ignorance, to cover the soul, to dress the soul up so that it can function in the material atmosphere. So that is very important. As far as this chapter is concerned, that was the first thing Brahma did. It's actually the first aspect of Brahma's creation before he started creating the living beings. And so from that 5 layers of ignorance, because the living entities are created from there, we can see their behavior. The yakshas, rakshasas, the demons, we can see their behavior because they are dressed up in these layers of ignorance. But as Brahma advanced his creation, he performed more austerity, he performed more devotional service, and then the latter part of his creation are more refined. The demigods, human beings, and ultimately the sages, so they are more refined. And even though they are more refined, but these elements are still there, especially with the demigods and human beings. These elements of ignorance are still there. Only the sages, they were created from Brahma's devotional service, Brahma's austerity, Brahma's knowledge, Brahma's, spiritual activities. And so they were very advanced. and they are entitled to give direction. They are to give spiritual enlightenment. They are to guide humanity. So they must be different. So they are only people we can say are not affected by these 5 principles of ignorance. But the rest of the creation is affected by the 5 principles of ignorance. So it's important to remember that as far as this chapter is concerned, because they're the building blocks of our material bodies. So having said this, we will proceed with today's chapter. Let's see. So, chapter 21, conversation between Manu and Kadarma Muni. So, text 1 says, Vidura ovacha, Swayambhuvasya cha manor, Vamsa parama samataha, Katyatam bhagavan yatra, Maitine naidire prajaha. Vidura said, the line of Swayambhuva Manu was most esteemed, or worshipful sage. I beg you, give me an account of this race whose progeny multiplied throughout sexual intercourse. So this is a summary of the chapter, or an overview of the chapter. From text 1 to text 11, Vidura inquires from Maitreya about the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu. From text 12 to text 34, Kadarma Muni bowed down before the Lord with folded hands and admitted that less intelligent people ask for material blessings from the Lord. From 35 to 56, Swayambhuva Manu approaches Kadarma Muni at Bindu Sarovar and saw him to be somewhat soiled, though invigorated from the Lord's sidelong glance, like an unpolished germ. So these are the sections that we shall be dealing with in this chapter. There are 3 sections. Vidura's inquiries about the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu. Kadarma Muni meets the Lord and has some interaction with the Lord. Then, right after that, then we have Swayambhuva Manu's approaching Kadarma Muni. So that is what we're going to be discussing. So the very first verse, which I just read, so the line of Swayambhuva Manu was most esteemed, or worshipable sage, I beg you, give me an account of this race whose progeny multiplied through sexual intercourse. So from the purport, which is on the slide, it says, hearing about the exalted progeny of Swayambhuva Manu. Actually, Vidura was not interested in hearing the history of persons who merely engage in sex life, but he was interested in the progeny of Swayambhuva Manu because in that dynasty, good devotee kings appeared who protected their subjects very carefully with spiritual knowledge. By hearing the history of their activities, therefore, one becomes more enlightened. So, Vidura is an exalted devotee. Vidura is a very advanced devotee. And that is why he chose to visit holy places when Duryodhana insulted him, he decided to leave the palace and took to a life of a mendicant, traveling from place to place, meeting different people, and drinking the nectar of Krishna consciousness. And because of his intense desire to hear about the Lord, intense desire to know, he met with Maitreya Muni. And Maitreya Muni, even though not a pure devotee from the onset, but somehow by some great fortune, he was present when Lord Krishna was about to leave the planet. Somehow or the other, I think we can say it's Krishna's plan. Krishna wanted to leave a message with Vidura or for Vidura, and so he attracted Maitreya Muni to his departure, to his moment of departure. Uddhava and Maitreya were the only people who were present when the Lord left this planet. And a special message was sent to Vidura when Krishna was leaving. And that also shows how dear Vidura is to Lord Krishna. Now, at the moment of leaving this world, he remembered Vidura. Everyone is trying to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, that is Krishna's instruction. Man mana bhava man bhakto mam yaji mam namaskuru. Krishna says, think of me. Become my devotee. Worship me and offer your obeisances unto me. And by so doing, you will come to me. That is Krishna's instruction, Krishna's order. So every devotee is trying to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the devotees are so dear to Krishna that even though everyone is trying to remember Krishna, Krishna is thinking about his devotees. Krishna is remembering his devotees. So when Krishna was about to leave the planet, he remembered Vidura. And therefore he left a message for Vidura. The message was heard by both Uddhava and Maitreya. But Uddhava was younger than Vidura, and therefore he did not feel qualified to deliver the message to Uddhava. So when they met in Vrindavan, Uddhava met Vidura in Vrindavan, but Uddhava did not reveal the message. He did not tell Vidura the message. He said, go to Haridwar. Maitreya Muni is in Haridwar. He's not too far away from here. Go there and receive your special message left behind by Lord Krishna. Vidura was ready to accept Uddhava as his spiritual master. Vidura was ready to take a very humble position in order to receive transcendental knowledge from Uddhava. But Uddhava, considering his age, he did not accept to instruct Vidura. So Vidura had to journey from Vrindavan to Haridwar, to meet Maitreya. So all that I'm trying to say is that Vidura is such an exalted personality, very exalted, that even Uddhava, who is considered Krishna's dearest devotee, it is said that Prahlad Maharaj is such a special devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that because of Prahlad Maharaj, the Lord had to appear from the pillar of Hiranyakashipu to confirm the words of Prahlad Maharaj, because Prahlad Maharaj told his father that the Lord was in the pillar. And so Lord Nrsingadev had to prove the words of Prahlad Maharaj to be true. So he appeared from the pillar to confirm Prahlad Maharaj's words. And that shows how dear Prahlad Maharaj is to Lord Nrsingadev, that whatever Prahlad Maharaj said, Lord Nrsingadev confirmed. But it is said that superior to Prahlad Maharaj are the Pandavas. Pandavas are superior to Prahlad Maharaj. And superior to the Pandavas are the Yadavas. Superior to the Yadavas is Uddhava. And superior to Uddhava are the Gopis. And superior to the Gopis is Srimati Radharani. So this is the progressive superiority. So Uddhava, Vidura met Uddhava. Vidura met Uddhava in Vrindavan and wanted to hear from him the message Krishna left behind. But Uddhava considered himself unqualified to speak to Vidura. He felt himself unqualified to give instructions to Vidura. He considered himself unqualified to be the spiritual master of Vidura. So he directed him to Maitreya. So Vidura is such an exalted personality, very exalted. So why should such an exalted personality be interested in hearing about the history of persons who were engaged in sex life? So Vidura was not interested in hearing the history of persons who were merely engaged in sex life. He was interested in the progeny of Swayambhuva Manu, because in that dynasty, good devotees kings appeared who protected their subjects very carefully with spiritual knowledge. And by hearing the history of their activities, one becomes enlightened. So it is mentioned Ritvehitam sadhu sabha sabjitam Mahatma granya unukraman manaha yudhishthiro daitya pate mandivitaha prapyacha guyastanayam swayambhuva. That after hearing about the activities and character of Prahlad Maharaj, which are adored and discussed among great personalities like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, Yudhishthira Maharaj, the most respectful king among exalted personalities, again inquired from the great sage Narada Muni in the mood of pleasure. So Narada Muni is speaking to Yudhishthira Maharaj about Prahlad Maharaj. And Yudhishthira Maharaj, who himself is a great devotee, was taking great pleasure in hearing about Prahlad Maharaj. So he inquired again and again to Narada Muni, please tell me, please narrate more, please speak more about such an exalted king, exalted devotee like Prahlad Maharaj, whose glories purify the three wells. So therefore, Vidura is interested in hearing about such exalted devotee kings who enlighten their citizens, who enlighten their praja with spiritual knowledge. So such kings, they are Raja Rishis, they are exalted devotees. They are not ordinary kings. And so to hear about them is considered a great activity, a great punya. And so we are going to hear more about such great personalities from Swayambhuva Manu. He has his two sons, Uttanapat and Priyavrata. From Uttanapat, we have Dhruva Maharaj, very exalted devotee, Dhruva Maharaj. And from Dhruva Maharaj, there are many descendants, very great kings who came in that line. And from Priyavrata, we also have very great kings that came in that line. So therefore, Vidura's interest is not just the issue of population, the issue of sex life. His actual interest was how these wonderful devotees, acting as kings, how they populated the world and gave spiritual knowledge to the people of the world. That is the interest of Vidura. So Vidura's eagerness to hear about these kings is showing Vidura's eagerness to hear about the devotees of the Lord. It is said that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the history. Srimad Bhagavatam is the history of the Lord and his devotees. It's a narration of the activities of the Lord and his devotees. If these subject matters were not transcendental and they were not important, they would not have been reported in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So therefore, this subject matter that Vidura is asking Maitreya to narrate, they are of great spiritual significance. And that is why an exalted personality like Vidura is asking Maitreya Muni to narrate all these incidences. So we go to text 2, unless there's a question. Text 2 says, Priya vrato tano padro shutao swayambhuva syavai yata dharmam jugu patu sapta dvipavatim mahim. Translation: the two great sons of Swayambhuva Manu, Priyavrata and Uttanapat, ruled the world, consisting of 7 islands, just according to religious principles. The slide says, hearing about the deeds of pious kings. There is no chronological history of all the Indian kings in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But the deeds of the most important kings, such as Priyavrata and Uttanapat, and many others like Naramachandra, Maharaj Yudhishthira, are recorded because the activities of such pious kings are worth hearing. People may benefit by studying their histories. So, hearing about the deeds of pious kings is as good as hearing about the activities of the Lord. The activities of exalted kings, devotee kings, is related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because they are such exalted devotees, every action of theirs is linked to the process of bhakti. And so hearing about them is glorious. In the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned, Tatra mam anumoderam devastri bhuvaneshwaraha muhurtena brahmalokam katwanga samasadayat. The presiding demigods of the three worlds showed mercy to King Katwanga. And because of that, Katwanga Maharaj was able to achieve the spiritual world in a single moment. The story of King Katwanga is mentioned in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Katwanga Maharaj was a very powerful king, devotee king of the Lord. And sometimes the demigods would engage Katwanga Maharaj in fighting on their behalf. So one time when the demons attacked the heavenly planet, the demigods hired the services of Katwanga Maharaj. And Katwanga Maharaj single-handedly defeated all the demons. So when Katwanga Maharaj defeated the demons, the demigods were very excited and they decided to give him benedictions. So they asked Katwanga Maharaj to ask for any type of benediction he needed. And Katwanga Maharaj said, first of all, before I ask for any benediction, let me know how long I'm going to live. And from the revelation, it was that Katwanga Maharaj had just a few moments to live. So Katwanga Maharaj said, what is the use of all these benedictions you want to give me? If I have only a few moments to live, what am I going to do with all these benedictions? The only benediction I want is Krishna consciousness. The only benediction I want is achieve the lotus feet of Mukunda. The only benediction I want is to return home back to Godhead. If there is any benediction you want to give me, this is what I want. Not any material benediction. And so all the demigods, they prayed that may the Lord give him his desire, award him his desire, because he has served the demigods so wonderfully. He has delivered them from the clutches of the demons. And so by the mercy of the demigods, Katwanga Maharaj attained to Krishna consciousness in a matter of few moments. So such kings are glorious. And to hear about them is glorious. Srimad Bhagavatam is a history of great rulers of different parts of the universe who ruled this earth of 7 islands. Priyavrata and Uttanapat are the sons of Swayambhuva Manu. And they were such exemplary kings. They were such exalted kings. They were such devotees of the Lord. For instance, Priyavrata, even though a Kshatriya, he did not want to rule. He renounced the kingdom. He was the senior son of Swayambhuva Manu, but he was not interested in managing the affairs of the state. So he renounced and went to the mountains, Mandana mountains, to perform austerities. So the junior brother, who is Uttanapat, had to take control of the state. He had to become the king. But later on, when Dhruva Maharaj attained perfection, he so inspired his father, Uttanapat, to immediately also leave for the forest. Because Uttanapat saw that his senior brother had become a sadhu. He had renounced the kingdom and gone to the forest to become a mendicant. And he took over the administration of the state. But now, Uttanapat witnessed that his little boy, 5-year-old boy, Dhruva Maharaj, also went to the forest and came back as a very exalted devotee of the Lord. So Uttanapad thought, what am I doing here? I must also go to the forest. So without any delay, Uttanapad gave up the kingdom and also went to the forest. And Dhruva Maharaj ruled the planet for 36,000 years. And at the end of 36,000 years, he was taken back to the spiritual world. He was sent to Dhruva Lok, which is as good as Vaikuntha. At that time, there was nobody to rule. So Brahma had to call Priyavrata to come back and take over the state. So Priyavrata was defiant. He was not ready to come back to practice, to rule, because he was already very advanced in spiritual consciousness, and he felt coming back to rule was incongruent with his status. But Lord Brahma, Narada Muni, and many other exalted personalities, they urged him, and he relented. He agreed to accept the position of the king. So anyway, these exalted kings are devotees of Krishna. They are devotees of the Lord. And any discussion about them is as good as hearing about the Lord. And that is why Vidura is eager to hear about them. So text 3 says, Tasyavai duhita brahman deva hutiti vishruta patni prajapate ukta kadharmasya trayana nagaha. Ruchi, excuse me, somebody is calling me. I have to put it iPhone off. I forgot. So, translation, O holy Brahmana, O sinless one, you have spoken of his daughter, known by the name Devahuti, as a wife of the sage Kadharma, the Lord of created beings. Okay, there is supposed to be a slide here. The slide is not there. So let's take from the purport. So he said here we are speaking about Swayambhuva Manu, but in Bhagavad Gita we hear about Vaivashata Manu. In the present age belongs to Vaivashata Muni. Swayambhuva Manu was previously ruling, and his history begins from the Varaha age, or the millennium when the Lord appeared as the boar. There are 14 Manus in one day of the life of Brahma. In the life of each Manu, there are particular incidents. The Vaivashata Muni of Bhagavad Gita is different from Swayambhuva Manu. So I think in our previous discussion, I think that was the beginning of chapter 20, we discussed the various Manus, the 40 Manus of Brahma's day. Vaivashata Muni is the 7th Manu in the day of Brahma. So it is said that Brahma's day is in the noon. Brahma's day is half day. So therefore 14 Manus, 7 Manus out of the 14 Manus have ruled. And the last 7th is Vaivashata. So here it is said that Swayambhuva Manu was the first Manu from the beginning of creation. He was previously ruling in the age of Varaha millennium, when Lord Varaha appeared in his boy incarnation. So, but now We have Vaibhava Manu, who also became a student of Bhagavad Gita. He received Bhagavad Gita from Krishna. So he's also very exalted personality to directly receive instructions from Krishna. It also shows how exalted that person is to receive that information. So hearing the deeds of such pious kings is such as Swayambhava Manu or Vaivashata Manu or Chakshusha Manu. Hearing about such kings, Manus, is auspicious because they're all very exalted personalities and they're all linked to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, hearing about them is relevant. Text 4 says, Tasyam Savai Mahayogi Yuktayam Yoga Lakshanai Sasarja Katida Viryam Tanme Suru Save Vadaha. Somebody like to read text 4?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Go ahead.
Translation. How many offspring did that great yogi beget through the princess who was endowed with eightfold perfection in the yoga principles? Oh, pray, tell me this, for I'm eager to hear it.
Okay, you can read from the slide.
Okay. Begetting children after advancing in yoga. The husband and wife, Kadabamuni and Devauti, were advanced yoga practice. The husband was a Mahayogi, great mystic, and the wife was a yoga lakshan, or one advanced in yoga. They united and produced children. Formally, after making their lives perfect, these great sages and saintly persons used to beget children. Otherwise, they strictly observe the rules and regulations of celibacy. Hare
Yeah,
Krishna.
thank you. Hare Krishna. So, Vidura is asking Maitreya, how many offsprings did that great yogi beget through the princess who was endowed with eightfold perfections in the yoga principles? So Vidura wants to know how many offsprings did Devahuti beget? Because Devahuti is described here as Yoga Lakshana. Yoga Lakshana means she's very advanced in yoga. She had attained perfection in yoga. And Kadarma Muni is described as Mahayogi, a great yogi. So a combination of a Mahayogi and Yoga Lakshana is a wonderful combination. And therefore, the children that will come out of such a combination must be exalted. I think somebody has to unmute or whatever, or mute. There's some noise coming from somewhere. So please, let's minimize that noise. So, Devahuti was a yoga lakshana, advanced in yoga, and then Kandaramuni was a Mahayogi, a great yogi. So therefore, if you combine these two great personalities, we must expect a very wonderful progeny. Therefore, it is no surprise that the 9 daughters that were born of Devahuti became the wives of the 9 sages. And the last born of Devahuti, who is Kapila Dev, Kapila Muni, was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah, because both parents were very qualified. Father, a Mahayogi, mother, a Yoga Lakshana. So when there is such a combination of exalted characters, exalted personalities, advanced souls, obviously the progeny will be very powerful. And that is what we are seeing here. So the husband and wife, Kadarma Muni and Devahuti, were advanced in yoga practice. Husband was a Mahayogi, a great mystic, and the wife was a Yoga Lakshana, or advanced in yoga. So Prabhupada writes that formerly, after making their lives perfect, great sages and saintly persons used to beget children. Otherwise, they strictly observe the rules and regulations of celibacy. So the scripture says, Brahmacharyam tapasocham santosho bhuta suhridam. Grihastha pasyapi rato gantu sarvesham mat upashanam. Chastity, penance, purity, peacefulness, and kindness to all living beings constitutes the Grihastha ashram. A Grihastha who approaches his wife for procreation only on the days sanctioned by scripture is considered a chaste Grihastha. And for such a Grihastha, there is no difference between him and a celibate brahmachari. So, in the case of Mahayogi, Kandarma Muni, and Yoga Lakshana, Devahuti, Mahayogi Kandarma Muni was living his whole life as a brahmachari, as a celibate. But when there was a need to procreate, when there's a need to bring off progeny, he and the wife, they copulated, they met, and then children were produced. And right after that, again, he assumed his celibate position. So the Bhagavatam is saying that the Grihastha who approaches his wife for procreation only on the day sanctioned by scripture and only for the purpose of procreation, such a Grihastha is described as chaste, and he is as good as a brahmacharya. So Kandarma Muni and his wife Devahuti, they were such chaste grihastas. They were such chaste practitioners. And therefore, they could bring into the world such exalted souls as the 9 daughters who became wives of the 9 sages, and the 10th child, who is Kapila Dev, an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is the power of celibacy. When one practices celibacy, he automatically becomes very powerful. So in relation to the question regarding the progeny of Uttanapat and Priyavrata, the next verse talks about that. It says, that's text 5. Ruchiryo Bhagavan Brahman Dakshova Brahmana Sutaha Yata Sarsarja Bhutani Labdwa Variyam Cha Manavim. Oh, holy say, tell me how the worshipful Ruchi and Daksha, the son of Brahma, generated children after securing as their wives the other 2 daughters of Swayambhuva Manu. So on this slide, you can see the Swayambhuva Manu had 3 daughters, Devahuti, Akuti, and Prachuti. These are the 3 daughters. Uttanapat had 2 sons and 3 daughters, King Uttanapat. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up. It's Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons and 3 daughters. 2 sons are Uttanapat and Priyavrata. Actually, Priyavrata is the older son. Priyavrata and Uttanapat. And then he had 3 daughters. The 3 daughters are Devahuti, Akuti, and Prachuti. So all the great personalities who increased the population of the world in the beginning of the creation, they are called Prajapatis. Brahma is also known as a Prajapati, as were some of his later sons. Swayambhuva Manu is also known as a Prajapati. Daksha is another son of Brahma. He is also Prajapati. So Swayambhuva Manu had 2 daughters. So he had 3 daughters. It's not 2. Swayambhuva Manu had 3 daughters. The other 2 daughters are Akuti and Prachuti. The first daughter is Devahuti. So the Prajapati Ruchi married Akuti, and Prajapati Daksha married Prachuti. These couples and their children produce immense numbers of children to populate the entire universe. Vidura's inquiry was, how did they beget the population in the beginning? So these 3 daughters of Swayambhuva Manu, they and their husbands, they are the principal Prajapatis. Kadarva Muni and Devahuti, Ruchi and Akuti, Daksha and Prachuti. From these 3 daughters of Swayambhuva Manu, the whole universe is populated. So everyone in this universe is coming from these 3 daughters of Swayambhuva Manu, Devahuti, Akuti, and Prachuti. Because from these 3 daughters, all the generations upon generations of the population of the universe has come about. So this is important because they are all Prajapatis. Brahma is a Prajapati, Swayambhuva Manu is a Prajapati, Daksha is a Prajapati. Ruchi is a Prajapati. And sometimes even the 9 sages are also considered Prajapatis because they married the first daughters of Kandarma Muni, and from them also many demigods and different races were also populated. So they're also considered Prajapatis. Text 6 says, Maitreya Uvacha, Praja Srijati Bhagavan Kadarmo Brahmando Ditaha Saraswatyam Tapastepe Sahasranam Samadashaha. Somebody like to read translation and the slide, text 6.
Okay, I read.
Right. Go ahead, Guru.
The great sage Maitreya replied, commanded by Lord Brahma to beget children in the world, the worshipful Kadama Muni practiced penance on the bank of the river Sarasvati for a period of 10,000 years. Purport: yoga practice requires a long duration of life. Therefore, yoga practice can be successfully performed by persons who have a very long duration of life, such as 100,000 years. In that way, it's possible to have perfection in yoga. Otherwise, there is no possibility of attaining the real perfection. Following the regulations, controlling the senses, and practicing the different sitting postures are merely the preliminary practices.
Thank you. So here we are hearing that Kadarma Muni practiced penances on the bank of the river Saraswati for a period of 10,000 years in order to become perfect in yoga. So yoga is not something that is done overnight. Yoga, professional yoga requires a prolonged practice. It requires a prolonged practice. There are other personalities like Valmiki Muni who practice yoga for 60,000 years. We have Vishamrita Muni. He practiced yoga for a very prolonged period of time. So Bhari Muni, 50,000 years. And many other yogis, they perform prolonged periods of practice in order to achieve perfection. So therefore, Prabhupada is saying that our modern age yoga practitioners are simply captivated by a very flowery language. Actually, Prabhupada says that the yoga that is advertised out there is actually bogus, because one cannot achieve the perfection that these great yogis actually achieved, like the case of Kadarma Muni. We shall see how Kadarma Muni utilized his mystical perfections in creating a spaceship that has never been experienced in this world. Kadarma Muni, he created a 7-story building, flying airship in the air, with thousands of people in it, with gardens, with lakes. We have not heard of any flying space saucer like that. Dharma Muni, from the perfection of his yoga, from his yoga siddhis, was able to create such an amazing object that no science has created so far. So therefore, Prabhupada says, in this age of bluffing and quarrel, people are easily deceived into accepting impractical methods of self-realization, but the Vedic literatures emphasize the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Now, because in this age, we are short-lived, hardly do we reach the age of 100. Very, very few people reach the age of 100. But yoga, to perfect in yoga, one needs thousands of years of lifespan to be able to perfect in yoga. So therefore, the yoga system that is being propagated, Prabhupada says, bogus, because with such a short number of years, one cannot achieve the perfections of yoga. However, the Vedic literatures recommend that because our lives are so short, and not only that, because we are always disturbed, and not only that, because we are all unfortunate in Kali Yuga, the best process for perfection cannot be this prolonged system of yoga. So the holy names are recommended for any serious-minded person who wants to advance in Krishna consciousness. So,
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question here.
All right.
This verse is talking about Dhyan yoga, the yoga of meditation.
Yeah.
And we practice Bhakti yoga. I have a twin question in one.
Okay.
From it is recommended that in this age, the yoga for this age is, because we're also practicing yoga.
Yep, yeah, doing yoga.
Although it is not specified here that is referring to Dhyan yoga, but we can see that it's talking about yoga of meditation.
Yeah.
But we're also practicing yoga. It is called Bhakti yoga.
Mm.
But the essence of the whole of Bhakti yoga is to chant the holy name of the Lord and remember him. Prahlad Maharaj gave 9 processes.
Yeah.
And of all the processes, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said the chanting of the holy name is the most effective,
yes,
paramount for this age.
Yeah.
So, and in attaining to chant this holy name that takes us back to Godhead, one has to also chant it purely.
That's true.
And that takes also a long time to achieve. I remembered when I joined the newly,
yeah,
in those early days, I think that was in 1990 or thereabout, something early, very early in the devotional service, I asked one of my senior God brothers, because I had been chanting before joining the temple, before even meeting the devotees. And I've been chanting for quite some time. So when I came to the temple for the first time, so I asked this question. I said, how long does it take to chant this name and get the result?
That's right.
So he answered me. He said, 10 years. I said, 10 years? That long? He said, actually, when you chant the holy name for 10 years, that is the beginning. So, and then 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in devotional service counting, we are chanting, and we cannot confidently say we are chanting Sudanam, a pure name.
Yeah.
So in reference to this, could we say that our process of yoga takes a long time to achieve?
Well, yeah, that's a nice observation. that all yoga systems, it requires a certain amount of time to practice. But the Bhakti process is relatively much easier and requires much shorter time to practice than the meditational yoga. As we see here that Kadara Muni had to spend 10,000 years in the forest, alone by himself, just living on fruits for 10,000 years. So, and there are others who even exceeded that. Vishwamrita, Vashista, Saubhari, and so on. All of them perform yogas for long, long periods of time. But in the process of bhakti, one may spend 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, or a lifetime. And maybe even sometimes it's said 2 lives or 3 lives. But it is much, much shorter than this 10,000 years, 60,000 years, 50,000 years, 80,000 years. It's much shorter. Because within 3 lives, even one is living, say like 90 years or 100 years, it means within 300 years, one can attain perfection. What to speak of if one is fortunate enough to remember the Lord's names in this very life, one can attain perfection. So, yes, some time is required to come to the stage of Sudanam. Sudanam is the ultimate, actually. Until we come to the platform of Sudanam, we cannot say that we have achieved the perfection of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, the perfection of Bhakti Yoga is to chant the pure name. And to chant this pure name, it could take a moment. Within one moment, one can chant the pure name. It could take a day. Within one day, one can chant the pure name. It could take a month. It could take a year. It could take a full lifetime or even many more lifetimes. So this pure name, Sudanam, is actually our goal. And that is why the acharyas, they always emphasize on attentive chanting. Without attentive chanting, it's not possible to come to the platform of Sudanam. Inattentive chanting produces all the offenses. The mother of all offenses is inattentive chanting. So a devotee has to work really hard on attentive chanting, pronouncing the names of the Lord, hearing them attentively. That is a key for opening the door to Sudanam, attentive chanting. And so this attentive chanting may take a period of time in individuals. 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, 2 lives, 3 lives, 4 lives, 10 lives. But the ultimate aim is to chant the pure name. So yes, some time is required for this perfection, but relatively, the Bhakti Yoga process requires less time. It is much more easier. It can be practiced anywhere, at any time, unlike the other types of yoga that have specific timings, specific locations, specific sitting postures, specific lifestyles. Those are not practical in the age of Kali. And therefore, the holy name is the most suitable for the residents of Kali Yuga. But depending on how seriously we apply ourselves, seriously we are attentive to the names of the Lord, we can achieve perfection or not in this life. So it's a matter of a personal approach to attentive chanting. So every devotee must put a lot of emphasis on attentive chanting. Call out all the names, hear all the syllables of the holy names, and that is the way forward. That will lead to attentive chanting, and as soon as we are able to chant attentively, the pure name will manifest. First, we have to come to the neutral platform, which is Namabas, when there are no more offenses. Actually, that is our greatest challenge, to perform offenseless chanting. That's our greatest challenge. But as soon as we come to the level of offenseless chanting, which is Namabas, then it doesn't take much time to come to the level of Sudanam. And from the experience of many devotees, that is what we should be praying for. Sudanam. That should be we should intensify our desire to experience Sudanam. If the desire is not there, we will not work towards it. But if we have the desire that this Sudanam, I want to experience it, I want to taste it, I want to relish it. Krishna Nam, Krishna Gun, Krishna Leela, Vrinda. Krishnera Sarupa Sama, Sarva Chit Ananda. Krishna's name, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's form, they're all the same. They're all full of transcendental bliss. So we must have an intense desire to experience Krishna's name. We must have an intense desire to chant the pure name, Sudanam. And the stronger the desire, the more we would approach it, the better we approach it, and the sooner the results will come. So it's an individual matter. One day, one single day, one can experience the holy name. But somebody may take months, and somebody may take years, yet somebody may take lifetimes upon lifetimes. So it's an individual approach. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the explanation.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So we go to the next verse, which is verse 7. Which says, Tata Samadhi Yuktena Kriya Yogena Kardamaha Samprapedi Harim Bhaktya Prapana Varada Shusham. Somebody like to read?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, go ahead.
During that period of penance, the sage Kadama, by worshiping through devotional service in trance,
Propitiated
by a personality of Godhead, who is the quick destroyer of all present upon those who flee to him for obsession.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. The target of perfection and realization is the supreme personality of Godhead. In the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly said that one who constantly engages in Krishna consciousness is the topmost yoga, the personality of Godhead, Hari. Also, fulfill the desire of his surrender devotees. One has to surrender into the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, Hari, or Krishna, in order to achieve rare success, devotional service, or engagement in Krishna consciousness is the direct method, and all other methods, although recommended, are indirect. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. So the target of perfection is the realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the target of perfection. So, Kandharva Muni attained that perfection, though he engaged in austerities and penances. But through that process, he worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because he satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the bestower of all blessings upon those who flee to him for protection, Samprasane Bhagavati Vimukta Jivan Nirmukto. Vimukta Jivan Nirmukto. One who is able to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhagavat Samprasane Bhagavati. One who is able to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one automatically becomes liberated from the physical and subtle bodies. Vimukto Jivan Nirmukto. So, Kandharva Muni, who is able to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he achieved the greatest result. So that is, and so it says, Samprapadi Harim, means Kandharva Muni satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead in various ways by the practice of devotional service. Kriya Yogena, by the activities of Bhakti, by the activities of devotional service, Kandharva Muni satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead in various ways. And as a result, the Lord actually appeared before Kandharva Muni. So that is the result, that is the benefit of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whoever is able to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nothing is impossible to achieve. Kim Alabhyam Bhagavati, Sri Krishna's Nirketane. Kim Bhagavati, Kim Alabhyam Bhagavati, Prashane Sri Krishna Nirketane. That one who is able to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is nothing impossible to achieve in this world. There is nothing impossible. So therefore, Kandharva Muni, who was able to please the Supreme Lord in various ways by his activities in yoga, he was endowed, he was blessed by the Lord. And so he achieved the 8 perfections of yoga. And he could display that yoga perfections in such a wonderful way. Kadharma Muni not only meditated, but also engaged in devotional service. Current day practice of yoga as advertised on billboards, on television, and radio, such yoga are not connected to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada says, many rascals have made themselves authority of yoga, and they are illegally collecting money from selling of yoga books, and yoga practices, and mantras, just to enrich themselves. But the actual purpose of yoga is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The actual purpose of yoga is to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yoginam api sarvesham, Krishna is saying. The best of yogis is that person who abides in me, who thinks of me, who is attached to me. That's the perfection of yoga. Those are the yogis, like Kadharma Muni. They are the yogis who have attained perfection. Others are simply using yoga as a commercial commodity. Their aim is not to achieve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their aim is to achieve some material benefit. So such yoga cannot bring perfection. Such yoga cannot give the perfection of the yoga siddhis. But because Kadharma Muni, he performed yoga for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was able to achieve all the yoga siddhis, as we shall see in the chapters ahead. In text 8, it says, Tavad prashano bhagavan pushkaraksha krite yoge darshayam asatam shataha sabdam prama dadat vapur. Then in the Satya Yuga, the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead, being pleased, showed himself to that Kadharma Muni and displayed his transcendental form, which can be understood only through the Vedas. The slide says, seeing the transcendental form of the Lord. Kadharma Muni attained success by yoga practice in the beginning of Satya Yuga, when people used to live for 100,000 years. Kadharma Muni attained success, and the Lord, being pleased with him, showed him his form, which is not imaginary. Karunam Ramaniyagam Aruknok Shektak Shadaram Pranatashrayam Nrinam Sharanam Karuna Navam. The form of the Lord is not imaginary. The form of the Lord is youthful. His eyes and lips are pinkish like the rising sun. The form of the Lord is very beautiful. The form of the Lord is very attractive. Seeing that form is like drinking nectar. And the Lord is always ready to reveal that form to his surrendered devotees. Only the surrendered devotees are awarded with a vision of such a form. So Kandarma Muni attained success in the beginning of Satya Yuga by performing various activities that pleased the Lord. And when the Lord was very pleased, the Lord revealed himself to Kandarma Muni. In text 9, it says, Satam Viryajam Arkabam Sita Padmo Palasrajam Snigda Nilalaka Vrata Vaktrab Jab Virajo Imparam. Kandarma Muni saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is free from material contamination, in his eternal form, effulgent like the sun, wearing a garland of white lotuses and water lilies. The Lord was clad in spotless yellow silk, and his lotus face was fringed with sleek, dark locks of curly hair. So, the Lord was effulgent like the sun, wearing a garland of white lotus. Okay, there's no purport here. White lotuses and water lilies. But the dress of the Lord is described here as it says what? It says the Lord was clad in spotless yellow silk. Krishna's dhoti is always yellowish. Always yellowish. So here, the Lord that appeared before Kandarma Muni, when Kandarma Muni had pleased the Lord sufficiently, when Kandarma Muni had satisfied the Lord revealed himself to him. And Kandarma Muni can see the beauty of Krishna, the beauty of Lord Narayan. He was dressed in a spotless yellow silk dhoti, wearing a beautiful garlands of white lotuses and lilies. His face was fringed with sleek, dark locks of curly black hair. And he was decorated with beautiful earrings and bangles. He was so attractive to the sight of Kandarma Muni. So in text 10, which also has no purport, it says, Kritinam Kundalinam Sankachakra Gadadharam Swetot Pala Kridanakam Manasparsha Smikte Shanam. Adorned with a crown and earrings, he held his characteristic conch, disc, and mace in three of his hands, and a white lily in the fourth. He glanced about in a happy, smiling mood, whose sight captivates the hearts of all devotees. So, the dressing of the Lord is further described here. He was adorned with a crown and earrings. And then he held his characteristic weapons and instruments, conch, disc, a mace, and a white lily in his fourth hand. Then the glance of the Lord was in a happy, smiling mood. And that beautiful form captivates the hearts of all devotees. So the Lord is not an imaginary figure. The Lord is a reality. Actually, if you talk about reality, the Lord is the only reality. Because he's a reality, all other emanations are coming from him. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate. Everything is emanating from the Lord because he is the reality. And because he is the reality, everything real comes from the Lord. Of course, the illusory aspect is also there, which is part of his energies. Material energy is an illusory energy. Sometimes it's manifest and sometimes unmanifest. It's manifest when the souls want to be away from Krishna, he makes that energy manifest. Otherwise, it is unmanifest. But the Lord, he is the real personality, is the real source of everything. And so from him, everything has come. So therefore, for the devotee, the Lord is not an imagination. The Lord is a reality. And so such descriptions give us the understanding and the hope that one day, when our practices becomes mature, when our practices reach a certain stage, the Lord will be pleased enough to reveal his transcendental form to us. As Raghupati Upadhyaya told Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Prayag, he says, Shamam ivam paro rupam puri madhu puri varaha vaya kaishorikam dhyayam adya iva paro rasaha. Raghupati Upadhyaya, a very dear devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was resident in Prayag, he met Lord Chaitanya. They engaged in some transcendental exchange. They were discussing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Raghupati Upadhyaya, he made such statement that actually Shamam Rupam, the form of the Lord as Shama Sundara, said that form is the original form. And Puri Madhu Puri Varaha, that form decided to make his appearance in this world from the point of Mathura. So Mathura is glorified because that form of Shama Sundara, he appeared in this world from the grounds of Mathura. So Mathura becomes glorified. And then he went on to say, and that form is always in a youthful form. Kaishori. Kaishori means below the age of 16. So that Shama Sundara form is always Kaishori, always not more than 16 years. A youthful personality. So in this way, Raghupati Upadhyaya describes to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the beautiful, original, youthful form of the son of Vasudeva or Nanda Maharaj. So the Lord has a form, a beautiful form, but he only reveals that form to his dear devotees, like Kadarma Muni. If one is not dear to the Lord does not reveal himself to such a devotee. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna that only when I give you divine vision can you see this my Samya Vapu form, this my beautiful form, this my relishable form. If I don't give you that vision, you cannot see. So Kadarma Muni is so fortunate that the Lord has revealed this form to him. And so I think we'll end on this this verse 10. Tomorrow we see how far we can go. If there are any questions or comments, they are welcome. Otherwise, we've already gone beyond time. We've gone above time by 8 minutes. So any comments or questions? Thank you. So today is Sunday. So it is next week, actually. It's next week, Saturday and Sunday that we will meet.
Okay, thank you very much. It's great, Srivas, Vanacari Prabhu, for your wonderful explanations and time with us. We are very grateful. And on this note, I request all of the devotees to unmute and loudly chant Hare Krishna mantra to appreciate our teacher for the day. His grace, Srivas Vanacari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama,
Hare
Rama,
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 Hare
Vancha
Hare.
Karpata Rubhyascha Kripa Sindhya Sevascha Patitanam Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinde Ki Jai.
Jagai
Srivas Vanacari Prabhu Ki Jai.
Maharaj ki Jai.
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 Our glorious assembly.